objectives of the bill, what are some of the other challenges this proposed bill intends to address?
Basically, as the objectives indicate, currently we don't have a law which regulates the relationship between a tenant and a landlord. And I'm talking about housing tenants and housing landlords. Of course, there is a distinction between landlords and tenants with respect to land, but this is with respect to premises. So this law basically tries to define how a landlord should relate to a tenant. If you are owning a house and I am renting it either to stay in it or to do business, how should we relate? What are the do's and don'ts for me as a tenant? And what are the do's and don'ts for you as a landlord? So basically the law is looking at that. And the experiences where these laws have been made, that you have to strike a careful balance to look at the rights and interests of both parties, because you have tenants on the other end of the equation, you have landlords on the other end, and therefore what we do as government is to put in place a framework where we create a law that accommodates the rights and interests of both parties so that they can be able to coexist and live in a harmonious relationship, which without the law, currently, sometimes people offend the rights of the other. We have seen situations where landlords evict tenants at midnight. At this time of the night, somebody comes and says, leave my house, you have small children, or a tenant refuses to pay rent, and then at midnight, he gets a lorry, packs the items and leaves the house. So this law is trying to create a situation where the landlord shouldn't be a loser and the tenant should not be a loser.
You actually talk of coexisting. Now, under the tenancy agreements, we see that the bill provides for both written and verbal tenancy agreements. Honorable, isn't this a bit problematic?
No, in law, oral agreements are allowable. And we have said for tenancies where the amounts of money involved are small. You find in the villages somebody's renting at the 10,000 shillings, 5,000 shillings a month. We have provided that an oral agreement can be acceptable. But also we have put further provision that the landlord should keep a record of some salient issues, like the amount of money being charged, the location of the premises, the name of the tenant. Should keep a record and give a copy of that record to the tenant. So it is not the tenancy agreement as prescribed in the law, but some form of record which could be kept by both parties, and it's allowable. It's allowable.
Okay, maybe let me take you back to, draw your attention to something that happened this week. We saw some arcade owners closing their buildings and leaving their tenants out. In such a situation, how will this bill help out?
Yes, absolutely. The law is trying to address such a situations. You see, sometimes landlords or even tenants bring arrogance in this kind of relationship. It was very sad that a landlord who owns a chain of these arcades just wakes up one morning and locks the various arcades, and yet he has a contractual relationship with the tenants who are occupying these arcades, and they are paying money. So we are now saying that the landlord should not have powers to just evict tenants at his own will. If there is any reason why a tenant should be evicting why a landlord should be evicting a tenant,
then there should be recourse all the powers of the landlord from him, since you'll be regulating him and directing him on how to run his business.
Yes, it is his business, but also the tenant is not staying there for free. He's paying money. I have paid for 3, 4, 6 months. How do you come and cross this business? In some cases, it is my home. I am staying there with my children. How do you come and cross? We are saying if there are reasons as to why the landlord should evict or get the tenant out, then he or she should go to court and secure a court order which can use now to evict this person. Okay, there is argument that the courts are slow. We are considering including maybe LOC courts, the local council courts, but we want to streamline this process. It is quite sad that somebody can just wake up, all of a sudden, you leave the TV studios here, you find a padlock on your door.
Outside.
Your property outside. That's
actually,
not proper.
That same point, let us, finally, maybe my final question is, kindly let us know on the issue of paying in dollars.
In dollars, yes. Yes, what we have provided in the law is that payments of all transactions to do with tenancies should be expressed in Uganda shillings. In other words, me, a landlord, should not force you to pay in dollars or pounds. But we have put exceptions that if the two of us have agreed, then we can pay in any other currency which we have agreed. But the payments should be in Uganda shillings. And the practice in the town, there are some landlords who are forcing tenants to pay in dollars. So once this law is passed by Parliament, that will stop.
Okay.
That will stop, yes.
Thank you so much, Honorable, for coming to our studios and, of course, shedding more light on this issue that, of course, is affecting so many people in the country. Now, let us go back to NTV Weekend Edition and, of course, go on with our stories. Now, finding an alternative and affordable energy solutions to electricity in rural areas to drive development is a headache for many African governments. However, countries like Ethiopia are harnessing the use of biogas. Gillian